Welcome to Tucker Carlson Today. We're about to sit down and talk to a woman called Jeannie Burton, whose story is remarkable. Very familiar in this country, but the outcome is very different from most. She succeeded. So to frame her life story, which we're about to hear a lot more about, we want to play you a clip that's ran on ABC, kind of summarizes who we're about to talk to.
This is Jeannie Burton, then and now, in the depths of despair, at the height of her glory. Her mother introduced her to marijuana at age 6, got her using meth at age 12. By 14, she was smoking crack. At 16, she was raped by a man who bought drugs from her mother. By 17, she'd attempted suicide. At 23, she was a full-blown heroin addict. 17 felony convictions, 3 trips to the state prison, and each time she got clean and thought about her life. This picture is from the last time she was in prison, 33 months at the Mission Creek Correction Center for Women in 2009. The last time she was arrested was 2012, and she was tired and numb and finished with it all.
So if you believe that addiction is one of the biggest problems in this country, maybe the central problem in this country, and evidence for that is mounting, you're going to want to hear the story of Jeannie Burton, because as you just saw, not uniquely, but rarely, she beat it. She came out on the other side. She's fully human and thriving. It's an amazing story, and we're grateful to have her in the studio now. Jeannie Burton, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tucker, for having me.
Well, it's just you just never, honestly, you just so rarely see this. If you're interested in addiction, you follow the stories of people who've been addicted. Like, your story is actually amazing because it's completely real. So let's just start at the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from Tacoma, Washington.
Ah, what a great town.
Yeah, I mean, depends on what perspective you're looking for.
No, that's true.
But, it definitely raised me, and I like myself, so I guess it's not so bad.
Amen. It's pretty, and there are nice people there. You had a tough childhood, though. I think it's fair to say we got a glimpse of it there. When did you start to get very involved in drugs and alcohol?
By the time I was about 12 years old, that's when I started to use hard narcotics.
Did you ever take a break from it, or just progress from there?
It progressed from there. I took a break the first time I went to prison.
Yeah.
There were some jail stays as well. They weren't lengthy enough to really consider anything. The moment I would be released, I would get high again. And then when I went to prison the first time, I think I was 22, maybe 23.
What'd you go for?
Possession of stolen properties. I stole cars a lot, and so when I would get caught with them, it was usually a possession of stolen property charge. So forgery charges. So there was a multitude of Class C felonies, and I think I had 6 or 7, and they sent me to prison for 14 months the first time.
Ooh, that's quite a stint.
Yeah, it wasn't so bad. Everybody I knew was there. My mom was there.
Your mom was in prison with you?
Twice. We'd served 2 prison sentences together.
What was that like?
Normal. It was normal. She was my drug partner, and we were crime partners, and she taught me a lot about hustling, and she was also my first abuser, and she is the one that introduced me to marijuana and then methamphetamine. So it seemed sort of a natural evolution of our relationship to be in prison with her.
Amazing. When you were in with her, did you see her regularly?
Yeah, we were in the same unit together, and then the second time I went back to prison also, she was there. She was there as well. So we were in the same unit together then too. I just had a really different relationship with her the second time. I went for more than a year without even talking to her in the same unit.
Amazing. I hesitate even to ask because I don't know what the answer is, but did she ever get better?
My mom died.
Sorry.
She improved a little bit. She used drugs off and on up into her death. She died from cirrhosis of the liver.
Yep.
A result of hepatitis C. And, she was in public housing, and she was living on SSI, but she wasn't, running the streets. But she was still using off and on up until the time that she died.
So it sounds like, how many times did you go to prison overall?
3 times.
3 times. It sounds like that was key to your recovery in the end.
Yeah, it was actually part of the catalyst that sort of propelled me into where I'm at today. I had went Well, back up a little bit. I married this guy. I married the guy that shot and killed my son's dad in 1991. I ran into him.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's a whole lot we didn't talk about, Tucker.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
No.
I'm laughing with you at the amazingness of your life.
Yeah. There's a whole gap there of stuff that we missed.
So just to unpack this a tiny bit, you married the man who shot the son of a child that you had.
Yes. They shot my son's
Shot the
dad.
father, right?
Yeah, I was tracking you. I knew where you were. Yeah.
I didn't even know where I was.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Well, so first of all, I went to junior high with the guy, and then the guy that shot and killed my son's dad. So, drug use. Most of the people I knew in Tacoma, we were all drug users. And
one specific drug, particularly, or just drugs?
Just kind of everything, really. A lot of folks were selling drugs. So back when I was young, we were doing. I drank probably every weekend. I smoked weed every day. I would do acid. I was doing methamphetamine.
Yeah.
I started smoking crack at the age of 14. I was in love with crack. Most of the people I knew did not do crack cocaine.
Why?
Because it was a different kind of drug. I came from an environment of meth users.
Yeah.
And so that was drug. Cocaine was a drug that was in the black community. I grew up in the black community, and I was raised by racists in the middle of the ghetto. So my whole entire life has been a contradiction. So
amazing.
But I loved crack cocaine.
But there was a racial.
Oh, absolutely.
Pardon my ignorance. Okay, so the whites did meth, blacks did crack.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, until that eventually evolved into everybody's doing everything. So now
Right.
we're looking at just a smorgasbord of.
I gotta ask, since you would know, what do you think is? All drugs are bad, of course, but what do you think is more destructive to your body and soul, meth or crack cocaine?
I would probably say methamphetamine. It brings out this level of deviancy that other drugs don't. Yeah.
That's its appeal for a lot of people, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I think the appeal begins with like the amount of energy that somebody gets, and then there's this focus and clarity, but it quickly evolves into a lack of focus and a massive amount of confusion, and then that turns into hallucinations and delirium, and and deviancy comes along with
Sexual
that.
deviancy is part of it.
Oh, tremendously, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No one ever says that, but
absolutely sexual deviancy. I've seen things and experienced things that are things that would never ever happen if I was clean.
Right. No, I get it, and you hear that a lot from people who've done it. That's like part of the reason it's so addictive. So you go to. Let me just ask you. Your first stint or first two in prison, you did what it seems like so many people do the second they get out, is they get high again. Right away.
I had a plan, right? Like, I wanted to get out and get a job. I had something that I had constructed in my mind. This resolve, essentially, like, okay, I'm going to get out and I'm going to get a job, and that's going to solve my problems. And so I got out. I had never had a job. I never really applied for a job. And so I didn't really know how to navigate that.
How old were you the first time?
23, I think.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know how to navigate that. And I was quickly offered a beer. When I got out, my brother-in-law lived downstairs. I released to my mother-in-law's house. My kids lived with her, and because I had two small children at the time, and so I was drunk the first night that I got out, and then within 2 weeks I was using meth with my mom again.
Yeah, because once you start drinking, like all
your body doesn't know the difference between the chemicals, and it lowers inhibitions, and then it sort of gives you an open doorway to doing whatever.
Yes, that's totally true.
Yeah.
So you didn't plan that though. So you're getting out.
I had a completely different plan. I was going to be a responsible mom, and I was going to get a job. And, even though I didn't have, any kind of education or a career path or, and in prison, I wasn't presented with any real training or anything like that.
No.
So,
what'd you do in prison?
The first time I was in prison, I worked in the kitchen, and then I went to work in the school as a teacher's assistant.
Oh, there was a school in the prison?
Yeah. Yeah, at that time, there were classes. There was a bill, the 2010 bill. It was in Washington. It was a sort of a result of the 1994 crime bill that went into effect, and things started to get taken out. Programs started to get taken out. Funding started to change, and then prisons had less opportunity. But at the same time, nothing is mandated inside of prisons unless it's unless the judge sentences you to something specific.
Right.
So everything is consensual. So I think that was somewhat problematic as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So your second release from prison, what was your plan then?
Yeah, so when I went into prison the second time, I had only been out 7 months. I had been shot. I shot someone else. I got into a
Wait,
massive...
you've been shot with a gun?
9mm.
Where'd you get hit?
Femoral artery. I'm surprised I lived. They were surprised I lived. I have scars that go from the top of my bikini area down, halfway down both of my calves, because it blew out a piece of my femoral artery.
Oh,
and so
come
they
on
had
now.
to cut. Oh, I'm not kidding. I could
What were
send
the
pictures.
I'm sorry, I didn't even know that. I don't think that's in my packet.
Most people don't know that. Most people don't know that.
So what were the circumstances of the shooting?
So I was in a house, and I was arguing with someone, and I had just shot at a house earlier that day. So there was a question of whether I shot myself or somebody shot me. My gun fell down my pants, and the bullet went this way, out my leg, but I was told that somebody else shot me. So I don't really know exactly
Why'd
what
you have
happened.
a gun on you?
Oh, because I had been raped multiple times, and, you know, I was living from house to house, and I did a lot of dangerous stuff, and I was somewhat vigilante-ish, and I was a woman, and I was by myself, and, you know, I had to protect myself in that environment. It's not a very savory environment.
No, it doesn't sound it at all.
So I carried a gun to protect myself, and I tried to not sleep because of a lot of the things that had happened. Not to make myself sound like a victim, because I was also a perpetrator, so I definitely robbed a fair amount of drug dealers and things like that while I was in my addiction, and definitely victimized society. So, but typically the gun was used to, you know, protect myself within my own subculture of other addicts.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
You were a very balanced person. Holy smokes.
You mean now?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
No, but your perspective is just very balanced. You're like floating above it and seeing it clearly.
Well, that's the only way I think that we can overcome things, is to be able to be completely aware and to be
Yes.
accountable, right? Because what I happen to know for a fact is that in order for me to move forward, I have to recognize that everything that happens in this little circle right here is a result of the decisions that I've made.
Amen. I believe that.
And for a really long time, I blamed other people.
Yeah.
It was my mom's fault. It was my first husband's fault. That's not to say that the things that occurred in my life as a result of their behavior did not affect me, but ultimately I was the one that was making the choice to destroy my life, right? And I think that, and I'm very thankful that I have the awareness that I do, because it's given me an opportunity to create this process for myself. And it took me kind of a long time, because I fell on these narratives that we hear all the time that you can't, right? And I made the decision to believe a lot of these things, and I held myself back. But we got to this place when I was 40 years old, where I'd married that guy. My mom died. I spiraled out of control. I ended up relapsing again, and I could not stop. I could not stop the drug use. I wanted to. I didn't want to be where I was. But it wasn't like, okay, so when an addict that's been clean uses again, it's like they wake up this humongous beast. If you could just picture like this demon over the top of you that is controlling, it's like you're a marionette, right? And like you're a puppet. And so I wasn't going to walk up to the police and say, hey, you should probably arrest me because I'm doing this. But what I recognized was that I didn't want to be where I was. I would rather be dead. I really gave it my best. He was trying to kill me. I tried to kill myself. The guy I was married to, my husband. And so
the guy who shot the father.
The guy who shot the father, yes. And so he had done a whole bunch of things. I was being traumatized for months. I was like living in this purgatory. I was miserable. I hated myself.
At 40?
Yeah, at 40 years old. And so
40's old enough that part of you, those of us who've been 40 know this, part of you must have thought, screw it, like I'm just done, I'm just gonna die.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was, and I prayed for it, and you know, my God saw fit to have me arrested, and thankfully so.
What'd you get arrested for?
Identity theft, forgery, and then eventually a felony elude. And so...
taken off from the cops?
Yeah, I thought I was in rush hour traffic. I didn't make it far. I drifted. And I was so tired. And so when he arrested me...
Were you driving on the sidewalk or just like stuck in traffic?
I mean, I was mostly stuck in traffic and tried to get over on the sidewalk, and then like drifted through the back of these apartments and like slid around and like came right next to a tree, and the cop was like, yeah, I was just gonna let you know that your lights were shorting out. So, yeah. So that was great.
You see the hand of God in that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I believe
And
you.
when I was arrested, I mean, the addict in me did not want to be incarcerated,
Yeah.
but the spirit in me was so grateful that it was over.
Even right then.
Right then. Right then. And I knew I wasn't going anywhere, but I didn't want to stay, right? Because my addict wanted to be on drugs.
Yeah.
But I was so tired. And like I had lived in this sort of purgatory where I did not want to be doing what I was doing, but I could not stop myself. And I'm so thankful. Let me just say this. I am so thankful that that wasn't happening right now. Because if it was, I wouldn't have a chance. I would be stuck living in that misery because we have all of these acceptance policies in place that are, it's like, oh, we're trying to address the symptoms over here. Oh, we don't like the crime sprees that are happening and we don't like these things, but we're feeding the beast down here and saying, oh, but we're just going to help them stay on drugs and we're going to help them completely destroy their lives. And if I was out there right now, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I'm going to tell you, I've accomplished some stuff.
Yeah.
Like I have accomplished some things, and I think it's really necessary. And I think, when thinking about
The punishment is necessary, is what you're saying.
it's so necessary. And I would probably pull back and reframe it. And it might feel like punishment to the addict when they first get locked up, but it's more like accountability. It's separation, right? And I think that that's what's necessary for us to address a lot of what's going on. We need to separate the person from the destructive environment. We need to implement the necessary services, and we need to hold people accountable and teach them to hold themselves accountable. And then they get this opportunity to grow, right?
You must have been the smartest drug addict in Tacoma. I mean,
I don't know how smart I was. I went to prison 3 times.
No, but it's just interesting. Your self-awareness and your ability to analyze your surroundings and your own behavior is unusual among the population. Most people can't do that, drunk or sober. It doesn't matter. But for all those years, up in from 12 to 40 for those 18 years. You must have had a lot of, because you're clearly smart, you must have had a lot of flashes of like, oh, wow, I don't want to be here at all.
It's been like that. It was like that from the first time I used. I didn't want to. Like, I was in Excel programs from a very young age. I was tested as gifted before I even started school. And so my entire life was kind of like watching the science project. I felt like I was consistently living in a contradiction. When my mom introduced drugs, I did not want to use them. I knew my dad went to prison, but my mom didn't like me very much. And so it was kind of like if you can't beat them, join them sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I consented for acceptance and love, even though I would get a mixed sort of bag of things with my mom because of her level of addiction. And so it was like that the entire time for me. But there came a time in my life where I just gave in, and so I tried to be the best drug addict that I could be. And that's kind of
No, I believe you. That's why I'm laughing.
And that's one of the things that I do. And I try to work hard to be the best in whatever I'm doing. Not that I'm better than everybody else, but like I'm the best me that I can show up as in whatever it is that I'm doing, right? And that's what I did in my addiction. But it got to this point where, and there were years where my gut would tell me to do things and I would ignore it because I was trained to ignore that.
Yes.
I was trained to follow what I was seeing, which always felt like a contradiction to what I was experiencing internally.
Yes.
And what happened as I followed what I was seeing is I was constantly living in this place of resistance and discomfort and destruction, essentially. And so, and it took me to 40, and I'm going to tell you, I'm actually grateful for every moment of it.
I believe that.
It was a horrible existence that I would not wish on anybody, but it's given me this opportunity to be of service. It's given me an opportunity to understand what's needed and what's necessary. And so it's giving me an opportunity to be able to show up in our world right now, specifically the United States, and say, hey, because all this stuff with me becoming popular on media all over the world is kind of an accident. I just was posting a picture so that other people that I've known for a long time could see that what's possible.
The before and after, the famous before and after
because I'm still associated with people that I've known in addiction. Social media is amazing for that. And I wanted them to know, because they know what I was like. They know about how I kicked in doors and carried guns and beat people up and did all of those kind of things. And to be able to see me turn my life around and parent my kid and supervise programs in social services for a number of years and go to the University of Washington on scholarships and become a Truman Scholar and have me help people understand like what that means is proof that it's possible.
Yes.
And that we're not doing things correctly right now, right? And so I got the opportunity, so I moved from Seattle.
It's so obvious that we're not.
We're not.
I've been sober for 20 years. I really believe in sobriety, but I've never thought I wanted to talk about it with anyone else.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation.
I knew we were going to become friends during this.
Me
I just
too.
want you to know.
But I hate to make anything about me. A, B, I really do believe in like leaving other people alone and like do your thing. It's it's up to you.
Right.
But then you look around and you're like, wait, everybody's on something.
Dude,
and this is actually wrecking the country, and I can't think of a bigger issue. I know it sounds crazy, but I really believe this. I don't think there's a bigger issue than addiction in America. I just don't.
I would agree with you, and I think this is what's problematic, is that people that without lived experience are the ones that are creating the policy around it.
That's occurred to me. Explain what you mean by that.
Okay, so for example, we have politicians, policymakers, law writers. We have social service founders and CEOs, and and I've worked with a number of them, and most of them are very educated and they're intelligent and they're well-meaning and they're grasping at straws because they haven't been there. So how do you know how to solve a problem that you've never experienced?
Yes.
So I spent a couple of years on campus at UW. I went in the first year questioning my own life experience because the jargon and the intelligence of these young people and everybody's so smart. And I was like, oh, and I'm so dumb.
You're like this working class girl. And
then George Floyd, and then COVID happened, and I was like, wait a minute, you're talking about my people right now. and I started to push back. And I was like, no, that's not what it's like. And I would really appreciate it if you asked me if I like being called inmate or whatever, because it doesn't seem that anybody that's written any of these papers has asked anybody with lived experience. So that's when I really started to recognize the power in my life and my life experience. And then, which is why I decided to go to school in the first place. Because what happened is I got clean in 2012. I was arrested for the very last time. And I made a decision to surrender my disease and that I was going to didn't matter what it took. I had no goal to be anything other than a clean and sober person that didn't have to get locked up and screw themselves over anymore. And I wanted to stop hating myself also. That was a big thing for me. And so I started along that process, and I made a decision to get out and follow these rules and stop using. And then I got together with this guy, and then at 3.5 years clean, I got beaten in my home to where I couldn't even get off the floor. And
beaten?
Yes. So he had relapsed and was intoxicated.
Oh, come on.
And and it was pretty bad, and it was all caught on 911, and I had him prosecuted. But during that process, he was looking at a life sentence. I thought that was extreme because I knew what was going to happen to the guy.
Right.
He's going to go in and come out the same guy, or he's going to go in there and rot, but no services are going to be presented to him. And so when I was working in social services at the same time, supervising 3 housing case management programs where I was serving my own people, shoving them into housing, not preparing them to be able to actually sustain housing, not helping them to improve their lives. We can say that housing improves your lives, but not if you don't know how to maintain it.
Well, of course not.
Right. And so that was a sort of a cyclical thing, right? And so I made the decision I needed to go to school. I needed to go to school to impact the prison system, and I needed to go to school to impact the homeless industrial complex, because people with lived experience are not the ones that are making the rules. And I started to look at this recently, and we have these acceptance policies. We're saying like harm reduction and housing first and decriminalizing everything, that those are the answers.
Safe injection sites.
Oh yeah, I can't get behind those because what we're looking at is we're feeding the beast down here and saying, oh, but we don't like the results over here, so let's put a Band-Aid on these symptoms. But let's keep feeding it down here. And what's happening is I'm watching my people die. So I've
Can I just ask you to pause? So from 12 to 40, you're using, but you're doing it with a lot of other people. You're part of a community of users, as you've said. How many of those people died?
Over the last 9 years, I want to say I've had more than 30 friends die in addiction. So, I mean, I've definitely had friends die when I was young, but over the last 9 years, there's been so many deaths, I can't even believe it.
So it gets to I've seen this in my own life, but it gets to a stage, there's an age after which people, like, they just die if they don't get better.
Yeah. And the quality of drugs have changed a lot, too, and people don't really care what's in them, and so... but, you know, in that gap between 12 and 40...
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? The quality of drugs has changed. People don't care what's
people
in
just put all kinds of chemicals in them. I mean, fentanyl seems to be in everything these days, but methamphetamine, the chemicals that they originally were putting in there didn't seem as harmful as some of the stuff that they're putting in it now.
It was just
it's causing people to literally go crazy. I've never been a manufacturer, so I can't really speak to what's in them. I can just tell you the effects of what I'm seeing when people use them.
So the meth is different now.
Meth is different. Cocaine isn't that good, and people cut it with all kinds of crazy stuff to make more money. They're not concerned about what they're putting in people's bodies.
What are they cutting it with?
I don't know. I mean, today I don't know. Like, I mean, even I don't know all the ingredients that people are putting in.
No, of course,
there.
but you know the world, so I've never heard this before. That's why I'm interested.
I mean, well, one thing that I find interesting is that they're literally putting fentanyl in everything.
Yeah, I know.
Everything.
But that's real, isn't it? Because sometimes you hear these things about drugs and you're like, is that real? They're putting it in weed, it's in cocaine.
They're putting it in everything. And how you know is, A, overdoses when people weren't actually directly using fentanyl, or urine analysis when people have to go in and UA for something and they find out they're dirty for all these other things. I remember I had bought some crack back in, I want to say 2008 or something, and I think I might have went into a detox, and I tested positive for benzos and a couple of other things, and I hadn't used any of those things. So, I mean, I guess that's an example of them putting things in there. But they cut it with, you know, when they're cooking crack, I know one of the common things is they would cut it with, like, NSAIDs, like ibuprofen and things like that, because it would expand it. So, but, I mean, and I think any ingredient that somebody that's manufacturing that stuff that can find that will actually expand the size of the drugs when they cook it, I would imagine it's fair game. And so... hard to say what that stuff is.
That's amazing. Of your 30 friends who've died in the last 9 years, how many had fentanyl as part of the OD?
Gosh, I don't even know if I can speak to that exactly because I don't know what everybody's always overdosed on.
But does it seem like people that's what they're dying from?
Yeah, I mean, one friend in particular who told me he was using fentanyl, he was snorting fentanyl and died in his car. I mean, there have been significant, like any of my friends that have opiate addictions definitely moved on to fentanyl, and so those that have died probably had a lot to do with fentanyl. A lot of gunshot deaths, you know, as a result of addiction stuff, and then heart attacks. Because of the age, you know,
it's hard on
the
your
age
body.
increased, so people started dying of heart attacks and, you know, that are directly associated with drug use, which is essentially an overdose, but they usually rule them out as heart attacks. So
I have so many questions for you, and I know I'm not going to get to all of them, but do you think, looking back, that there's a spiritual dimension to drug use?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, I mean, one way that I describe my own stuff is like I had a God hole, and like having a relationship, and this can turn so many people off, but I think that like just really sort of trying to understand like having a relationship with some sort of power greater than ourselves is really necessary, right? It teaches us about values and morals. It teaches us about kindness and interacting with our communities. And I think there's a really huge component that's missing with a lot of folks that are using drugs. For me personally, it is paramount. Like I start and end my day with a very intentional relationship with a higher power that I choose to call God. And it's been monumental in my progression and growth.
When you see people in the depths of addiction and they're hurting others and they're harming themselves almost indiscriminately, I mean, it's almost like watching someone stick a knife in his face.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you just said that. I'm going to tell you why. Because I was thinking about paralleling what we're seeing on the streets the other day with some sort of description. And I was thinking to myself, if you were walking down the street and you saw a guy stabbing himself with a knife, would you just walk by? Would you accommodate his space? Would you write policies? Would you write policies so that he would be okay? Would you create a building so that him and other people could safely stab themselves. It's no different with addiction.
I feel that way.
However, addiction, I think, is more insidious. I think it's more insidious and it's more destructive. If the guy's sitting there stabbing himself, the likelihood of him going out and stealing and robbing to continue to buy knives is probably pretty slim.
Yes, it is.
I mean, and I think about that, and it's just like, why are we allowing people to destroy themselves? And not only that, but to create an unsafe society for the rest of us, because we're saying, well, we need to allow people their own choice. But do we? Because what about their kids that they've abandoned?
It doesn't seem like much of a choice.
Well, once you put it in your body, it's not a choice.
Right.
And for me personally, I was living in hell and I could not get myself out. And I was so grateful that the police saved me because I couldn't do it myself.
But what's so striking to watch, I mean, you're clearly such a superior person. You've got deep...
That's a very nice thing to say.
Well, it's true.
But
I've known quite a few drug addicts, and you're the smartest one I've ever met. But no, you have these inner resources.
Yeah.
And you still couldn't get out of it.
I couldn't.
Right. So.
And that's because I do recognize my intelligence and I recognize my lack of will. A lack of willpower, I think, is a better way to say that, right? When it comes to addiction. And so I work every day. I wake up every day to combat that beast. Very, very intentionally, because I am not interested in it. I'm only one choice away from ending up in that situation.
So if you don't mind telling us, because I think this is, I mean, not everyone has had the dramatic life that you've had.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who just get lit up on wine when they get home, or taking benzos, or just hitting the weed really hard because they have to.
Right.
A lot of people know what addiction is, whether they want to admit it or not.
Right.
You've beaten it. What's your daily process?
Sure. I wake up usually at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes that's a little late. Sometimes
that's too early.
So that's what I hear, but I need personal me time, and that's the best time to get it. And I feel like I miss half of my day if I don't get up before 5. I feel like my day is shot. Not really. I mean, but I feel like I've missed a significant portion of my day. Thanks for the facial expression.
I work at night. I'm not up at 4.
So I get up and I read scriptures. I pray. I meditate. I send a specific gratitude list out in text to about 20 people. They usually respond.
What does that mean, gratitude list to people?
I don't think that a grateful addict gets loaded. Well, first of all, let me just say this. I've made the decision that whatever I tell myself is the truth, and I think that's the truth for everyone. So we have to be careful what we say to ourselves. And so I've made some certain things my truths. One of them is that a grateful addict does not get loaded. I'm an addict. I'm always going to be an addict. I'm not an addict that's in active use. So I make the decision to be grateful for my life. And a lot of the times, those are the things that are hard, the things that I don't want to face, the things that are happening, what feels like to me, that are allowing me to gain skills so that I can be a stronger person. And so I write this gratitude list and I send it out to more than 20 people.
What does that mean, though? What's on the gratitude list?
I mean, I could probably pull my phone out.
No, it's okay. I don't want to embarrass you.
I'm not embarrassed.
Because it's working.
I'm so transparent. I'm like an open book. It would take a lot to embarrass me. But I'm grateful. Like today, I'm grateful that my luggage was lost at the airport last night, because it gave me an opportunity to find my own patience and to say these things to myself, that it doesn't matter if I go on Tucker with the same clothes I was wearing yesterday, because it's about the message. It's not about what I'm wearing, right? And so I'm grateful that I wake up in the morning and that I get the opportunity to read. I'm grateful that I have the freedom to be able to fly to Florida. I'm grateful that my kid is pissed off at me but still texts me in the morning. I'm grateful that I get to stop talking when she tells me how I feel and just let her be 15. Different things like that. So I just find everything I can to be grateful for, because it changes my perspective about how I show up in the world.
Oh, I just love that so much.
Yeah, and so I do that, and then I have
And you're disciplined about that. You do that every day.
Well, so what happened is, remember I told you I was beat up in my house in 2016?
Yeah. So we never even got to the bottom of that story. What happened to the dude?
I feel like you're going to have to call me back on, because this is not going to be enough time for us.
So, I'm sorry, where we last left the story, I have a good memory.
Yes.
Is you're 3.5 years into sobriety, you're living with this man.
Yeah. I kicked him out because he relapsed.
He relapsed, he comes back, he beats you up pretty badly. It's caught on the 911 call.
All on 911 tape.
And then he's facing life in prison because he's got multiple prior felonies. You think that's an unfair punishment, even though you're the victim of the crime. So what happened?
And we can just scale it back to just me. First of all, I thought that was going to be my breaking point. I didn't know. I have had so much trauma and things happen. I was like, I didn't know if this was going to be the thing that broke me, right? And I was catapulted into having to take care of the bills he was responsible for and I was responsible for, because we were cohabitating. I was parenting my kid. He was way better of a patient parent than I was. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I was working in social services, not making very much money. So
was he working?
He was, yeah. He was working and making good money, and collectively we were making great money. And so, like, I had to figure all that out really quick, and I didn't feel capable of doing that. But I had just done this facilitation training for something called a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, because I was working in behavioral health at the time as a peer counselor. And in order to facilitate a group, I had to create my own RAP. And that is a plan that you create when you're well for when you're not well.
Yes.
So there were all these components. And I made the decision right around that time, bruises all over my face, back and legs and everything. And I said, I need to start practicing this. And so I started practicing it every single day.
So what happened to the man?
Oh, I fought for him. I helped him. I've made it so he has to do a whole bunch of classes and stuff.
So, but he didn't.
He's out now.
Okay.
He's out and doing well.
Is he good?
He's out and doing well. He's clean and sober. We are still married. He was a really great guy before he got loaded, and that probably sounds crazy, but I tend to believe that people can change. And so
they can change, and it's not crazy at all. People are different when they're when they're wasted, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And not everybody has the motivation to change. My foot was involved very closely to his rear end for a long time. Okay. So, but he's doing well. He's actually in Washington, and I moved to San Diego for this job, which you and I will talk about. I think you'll appreciate it, but we'll get there in a second. Anyways, so I made the decision to fight the cases with and against him, for and against him. It was essentially the prosecutor and I. In a battle, and great guy though. I like him. We were, super transparent the whole entire time. I told him my intentions, and he was like, okay, well, and it's kind of like, all right, see you in the ring. And I did a great job advocating for him, and he has had to be responsible on a number of
levels. So he got punished, but his life wasn't ended.
Yes, that is correct.
And that's what you wanted.
Mm-hmm. And he not only did he receive his consequences, he also has received services, and that is something that I was involved in every single part of the court process, and very intentionally, and at the same time trying to, not trying to, but running 3 programs for the nonprofit I was working for in Seattle, and I had trained 5 staff, and I was housing a bunch of people, and so. And I was also feeling really conflicted because I didn't have autonomy to actually do my job the way that I thought I would best serve my own people. Yeah. And I was carrying out somebody else's agenda with somebody else's contract. And that's when I made the decision to go to school, because I knew that our system needed to be changed, and I knew that the people that were creating the rules around it were not people like myself. And where do they get the insight from?
Well, and some of them have very intense ideological beliefs. Like they think the world should work in this very specific way, and sometimes it does work that way, and sometimes it just doesn't at all work that way. But
right.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, I was on a campus with a lot of the young, evolving next USA rulers. So, and they're very passionate and very intelligent, and they very much were fighting the man. And I'm like, oh, this is just a cyclical pattern. This is the same thing that's been happening in our country for decades.
Right.
So, gosh, I better do something about this. And I'm crazy enough to think I can change the world. So, so here I am.
So you mentioned when you first got to UW,
yes,
that you felt kind of insecure because it was a different world from the one in which you'd lived for 40 years.
Yeah.
And then all these young, self-confident, smart kids who are going to change the world and whatever, and you were kind of back on your heels. But then the country started to change a lot, and you're like, and you mentioned the George Floyd incident. Mm-hmm. How was your perception different from that of everyone else on campus?
Well, first of all, there are all these ideas about, raising up, certain voices. And so what I was doing is I was going around to the shelters that I worked at to my clients. And some of my clients I had smoked crack with and bought crack from. And then I evolved into a service provider that really advocated for them. And I was trying to find out how they were being served. with all of this defunding and all this money that was being asked for, and how were they being served differently? Were their stations being elevated? Were they being brought into the conversation? And not just that, but my friends from home too, because I grew up in the ghetto, and I grew up in low-income areas, and most of my friends were black, and so I'm finding out, like, from people, okay, how are you being served? What's different? And that it was nothing, and so a lot of the claims, and that's not to say that stuff doesn't need to be reimagined in
Right.
our country. That doesn't mean that policing doesn't need to, sort of evolve differently. It doesn't mean that our corrections system doesn't need to be evolved. But one of the things that I noticed were that there were a lot of folks pushing agendas to be in positions to serve a population they were not directly connected to, just because they were the same race. And so I found that to be problematic because a lot of the people that
You're very diplomatic, let me just say that.
Well, this is the thing. I try to not politicize
I
my
get it.
message, and I try to come from a place of my own personal experience.
You're not being political in the slightest.
Yeah, and so, and the thing is that I consider the people that I served when I was in social services my people. Those are the people I grew up with. Those are the people that I rubbed shoulders with. Those are the people that we had each other's back in the trenches. And those are the people that still weren't being served.
Right.
And so, and that idea of service, like, what does that mean, right? Like, being served as what, we're handing out beds and we're handing out syringes and we're handing out, is that really being served? Like, are we giving men fish? Or are we teaching them to fish? And
We're
not.
giving them rotten fish, it sounds
And that
like.
is, we're giving them lots of rotten fish and expecting them to eat it.
Right.
And then, elevating ourselves in the name of, well, I just gave them a truckload of fish.
Reach!
So
Preach. I love it. And we're elevating ourselves.
we're elevating
That is
ourselves.
the key to it, don't
Right.
you think? I'm a good person.
Right. Well, look at me. Look at me.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, I don't identify with certain things because of how I grew up and where I grew up, and I grew up in poverty, and and I grew up in these areas, and I'm like, but wait a minute, like, you're not actually serving my people. And so I just felt, I just was coming from a different perspective. I was coming from one where that's where I came from, and I don't see any of that stuff changing for where I come from. And so I just, I went on this kick. I've always been sort of on this kick, even when this stuff happened back. I don't even remember what that was. I think there was like Michael Brown stuff. I don't remember back in that time, and I was going around giving free hugs. And I was giving free hugs to everybody. I congregated this group of people because I think that what's missing is we need to really focus on how can we actually serve people. Because what did I need? I needed services implemented in my life so that I could take care of myself, right? And that's like, and that's what I am trying to do with my story, is to help people thrive and give hope and let people know that anything's possible. That
So-
yes, you can.
Let's say you're living in your car or in a bunch of random houses, as you said you once did, and you're stealing cars and forging checks in order to pay for your crack.
Yeah.
And the society sees you, everyone knows what's going on. How does a healthy society help you?
They remove me. I don't think that I should be able to sleep outside and go from house to house, first of all. I think that we have enough empty spaces to create shelters that are accountability based, that provide services. And I think I need to be separated from the environment.
Yeah.
I need to be, if I'm committing crimes and you know it, I need to be arrested. And I need to be removed, and I need to need to have a comprehensive, in-depth needs assessment done on me to look at where I come from, what my life experience has been like. Have I ever had a job? Have I ever rented a place? Do I have children? Where are my children? What's been my engagement with my children? What are my personal relationships like? Have I ever paid bills? And when the result of that needs assessment comes out, then I have services that are tailored to my direct needs.
But should those services be predicated on your staying clean?
Oh, absolutely. And because this is the thing, that's what part of the separation is.
Because that's kind of the key question. I mean, you can give an addict everything and it'll just disappear.
Well, and I don't, and this is the thing. I was given nothing. I had to work hard. I had to learn how to do hard things. I became willing to do hard things because I learned that I was destroying my own life. And I don't think that it is impossible I don't think it's impossible to create new patterns. We're human beings and we function in patterns, each and every single one of us, whether it's chocolate cake or heroin, right? And so we learn those patterns based on the environments that we're brought up in. So if my foundational learning did not teach me the necessary things that we've consented to as a society that are appropriate, because that's what happens in countries and cities and states, we decide this is appropriate behavior and this isn't, and we're creating laws around this to hold people accountable. Somewhere we fell away from that. And that's not to say that we had a perfect system. We were over incarcerating with no services at this end of the pendulum, and now we're under holding people accountable, whether it's through involuntary treatments, facilities that can actually house people, or incarceration. So now we're like, we need to meet somewhere in the middle where we have separation, services, and accountability.
Yes.
Where we're teaching people how to take care of themselves. Once you are free from the system, then that's great. You want to be a drug addict in your own home because you're working and you're taking care of yourself and you're not victimizing anybody in the community and you are not going to become a burden on us? Knock yourself out. We'll create policies around that. But I don't get to go out and victimize people. And that's what I did. I stole out of your mailbox. I would break into your house. I would steal your bank checks. I would clean out your account. If you were walking down the street with a purse and I needed your purse more than you did, I would push you down to the ground. Probably I personally wouldn't beat you, but I know many people that would. I was not an anomaly. I learned these things from many other drug addicts doing the same thing. And those are the things happening on our streets. My kid can't go to the park on her own. Schoolyard has needles in it. People get to live wherever they want in my neighborhood. Police aren't coming anymore. There's no help. There's no help for the people suffering. And it's kind of like I said to...
And there's no help for you,
There's no help for me.
The citizen.
And shame on you, citizen, for thinking that somebody should have to be accountable. You terrible citizen.
Exactly.
It's your fault. It's your fault. And you should actually have to go to work and pay for them to do this. So, I mean, that's where we're at. And it's just absurd. It's kind of like there are 7 kids in my family. If 3 of us have good jobs and the other ones decide to be drug addicts, that's like saying, well, now you guys have to support them and their kids. Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. And so I have...
I like your attitudes.
Well, thanks so much.
Because A, you've earned them. B, you've thought about them. And C, they're just completely consistent with human nature.
Well, I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
I've been a taker and I've been a giver. And, and so the coolest thing is like I found some other folks that are aligned with me, right? And I moved down to San Diego to participate and launch this national nonprofit. We're called an Overcomers Network. There are a lot more people like me in our country, and I know some, and we plan to find some. And
I have not met, I know a lot of people, and I've met very few.
Oh, I can introduce you to some.
I'd love to meet them.
Yeah, and so I am the national spokesperson for the National Overcomers Network. I was recently hired. You like my shirt?
I do.
Anyway, we just launched this. These folks found me through the same video that you showed at the beginning of your show, and they asked me to come down and check out what they're doing, and together we're trying to develop a nonprofit that not only highlights stories like mine, but where we're finding folks, bringing them into the network, and where we try to advocate for policy change. We're trying to get states to sign on with us. We're trying to find the nonprofits that are helping facilitate folks growing up out of beyond the need for outside services, right? We want outside services to be implemented, but we don't want them to be the destination. We want them to be the hand up, essentially, that's pulling folks up out of the rut.
Yes.
And helping people to become their best selves. where we're no longer bleeding society, but we're no longer victimizing society, and we're actually helping grow that person to a place of self-respect and a place where they're actually able to go back and give service to other people in the community as well.
A place where they can wake up every morning and be grateful for something.
And be happy with the person they're looking at in the mirror, where they don't want to destroy that person anymore.
So I gotta ask, one of my other obsessions along with addiction is the collapse of men. It's just so obvious and no one mentions it. But of the people you know who've not only overcome addiction, but really become outstanding contributors,
yeah,
what you've done. So it's not just that you're sober, but it's that you're focused and you're actually trying to improve the lives of other people, you know? How many are women and how many are men, percentage-wise? Just guess, roughly.
I would say, let me look at that. I would probably say that maybe like 20% are women and 80% are men.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I just think it's because maybe there's not more men than women, but I just notice, I just notice a lot more men that I have met that are doing things, and who knows, maybe it might, I don't know. That's just in what I'm seeing on
that's so
social
interesting.
networking, but yeah, I would say they're really making super huge, powerful moves. But they're definitely, I know a lot of people that just have regained their own life. Well, that's not true. I mean, in San Diego, though, in this program that I have gotten the opportunity to know, I know there are a lot of women that have been, but in my own personal network, there's probably a lot more men.
That's heartening to hear that. I'm rooting for men because I think they're in trouble. Last question. You've seen the drug OD numbers, which are just the tip of the iceberg, because for every OD, there are a lot of people like you who are living in hell.
Yeah.
OD is just the last stage. But there are over 100,000 in a year deaths in the United States. And the common view is that that's connected in some way to our response to Corona, to the COVID lockdowns. Mm-hmm. What effect has the last 2 years we're focused on this virus had on addiction and people trying to get sober, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good question. I mean, my opinion on that is that it's been really hard for folks that are in recovery that already have sort of social issues that weren't really strong in their recovery, because we had to move to no recovery support. So folks that were already clean, to then it transitioning into Zoom and people feeling sort of a lack of personal engagement with that process. And so there have definitely been a lot of relapses amongst my own circle of people, and there have been a number of deaths. And then I think also, I think it's sort of been it's had a negative effect on people being able to find recovery. Because Zoom, because you can't come near anyone, and people sort of need that. We need that community. We were designed to be social creatures.
Of course.
Right? And I think
that's why solitary confinement's a punishment.
Right. So yeah, I think that COVID has had a tremendous effect on the state of our nation. I mean, and I believe that probably even with folks that don't identify as addicts have probably increased their drug and alcohol use during that time, right? So,
without question.
Yeah.
Ginny Burton, one of the most impressive people I've ever interviewed in 30 years doing interviews.
Thanks so much.
I mean it. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So, are we still rolling?
We're still rolling. Hit me
okay,
with it.
because I really want to talk about something before I let you go. So I am, I said already, the national spokesperson for the National Overcomers Network. And we have a website. It's nationalovercomersnetwork.org.
Okay.
And we are planning to do a convention in spring of 2023. We are going to be looking for people like myself across the nation, and I really hope that people reach out and find me.
People like yourself, what do you mean by that?
People that have overcome, and it doesn't have to just be addiction, but anybody that's been in submission to systems. We are looking for folks that are overcoming their own challenges so that they are no longer in submission to systems. Right now, our government spends $1 trillion a year on programs that are designed to address problems, but they're not.
I've noticed.
They're addressing symptoms.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is to create a network that actually goes in and advocates for policy change with the programs. We want states to sign on, and we're trying to find people similar to myself, and there are lots out there, and we will do this. And so we're developing this nonprofit, and it's going to be really fantastic. And what we really believe is that that three-pronged thing, that any program that's successful is going to have those three components: separation, services, and accountability. And we want to be able to really sort of try to change some policies so that we can get support around that kind of stuff in the
separation from the environment you're living in.
Yeah. Implementation of necessary services, and holding people accountable, teaching them to hold themselves accountable, and teaching accountability practices. And so, we're in the development stages of this nonprofit, but you can find us at nationalovercomersnetwork.org. You can find me on my website, which is vginnyburton.com, and that's also my handle on social media. And so, I just wanted to be able to talk about that a little bit, because that's what I'm doing with my life, right? Like, my life is not an accident. It was designed so that I can serve as many people as possible and to create a safer society. And I really think it's necessary. I think it's necessary that we get folks with lived experience in this kind of position to say, hey, we don't think so. We need to be consulted so that we can create some real solutions.
When I hear someone say, I'm grateful I was arrested and went to prison, that's when I stop and listen carefully. So I agree with you completely.
Cool.
Ginny Burton, thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Tucker Cross Says, the name of the show. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday here on Fox Nation. We will see you every weeknight, 8 p.m. on the Fox News Channel.